So thank you, everybody, and fabulous to have you all introduce yourselves, gives us a little bit of context and brings everybody's voices into the room. And today I will cover the 8 most important skills to lead and grow our business through uncertainty. And I wanted to frame this with within the frame of we're coming out of lockdown, and what are we going to take responsibility for in terms of business growth? I mean, is there anyone in the room who doesn't want more business growth? Right? Because, ultimately, we're either growing or we're slipping backwards. And it's the more and more our focus is about changing how we lead. How are we using data? How are we making better, faster decisions for ourselves, our business, our people, and our planet? That's really the focus of why are we investing time and money in our leader development work. So today we will take a journey, a 5-stage journey, and each of us have our own specific catalyst, a reason that we have come into the room today. And I would love you to set that intention today, and perhaps it's curiosity, perhaps it's meeting people, but what will that make possible for you? What is an outcome that will tell you that your time has been meaningful today in this next hour or so? Because as we go forward, we know that when we get the more specific we become, transformation happens in the specific. So what I'm intending to do is to deliver some information and insights and ways that a fresh frame that you can take away with you to use for problem solving, to expand your perspective taking capacity of yourself and how you approach problem solving. Because the only certainty post lockdown is more uncertainty. Is there anyone who's got it sorted? Right? We don't. Nobody has it sorted. Nobody really knows how to do business in this incredible virtual world, and so there's going to be the disruption will continue. So what can we do differently? How do we future-proof our business? How do we future-proof our own relevance? What does good leadership look like now? And this is where these are the kinds of questions that leaders and organisations and individuals hire me to work with them through. So if you can pop your intention in the box, then this will then give you something to come back to at the end of the session. So did I meet my need? Right? Because this is always the frame that we come into a working session like this. We are each responsible for the value we derive out of any kind of workshop or information session. So if we can take that responsibility on, and it might be, what problem are we solving? Are we researching better ways to become a leader? Are we researching better ways to change? What is one thing we could start? What is one thing we could stop? What is one thing we would overcome? Right? Because when we have this stirring to create something better, to become better, to create growth, there has to be disruption. So I'm very curious, Annette, to hear how you go with creating change without disruption. I think you'd have a whole new book there, because we've got to disrupt the status quo in order for change. And as we'll see in a moment, there is a lot of disruption already happening around us. So how do we harness that? And it always comes back to starting with us. And today's session is for you as a leader to focus on you. So when you think about what problem are you solving, or what thing do you want to improve on, what do you want to start, stop, or overcome, have it be something that is intrinsic to you. Like because often I find leaders will straight away go to the team, or they go, you've got 1,000,001 things. Like someone else said, running a business is a lot more than just getting more sales. And same with leadership. One of the big issues with leadership is that everything else becomes far more important than you yourself. And it is you yourself are the biggest income producing asset in your business, but you need to value you and you need to treat yourself that way. And this is an opportunity to do that today. So through our research process, we'll often come through and we'll come through with 1, 2, maybe 3 ideas or 3 different pathways that we are considering as we take the journey. And what we're working towards is some kind of outcome. We want to go from A to B, right? So the catalyst throws us into a research and development phase. The breakthrough comes when we decide on one idea and take that path forward. And that's the one outcome that I want you to focus on today. And this is where the transformation process starts. This is where we go into action. And this is where in the breakout rooms, we will take the information that I've covered here today and we'll discuss that. You take the issue that you want to solve or want to work on, the challenge that or frustration you have, and work through it through the lens of the 2 aspects of mental toughness, and look at how you can take a different lens to be solving that problem. And ultimately, we've got to be in action to be testing, measuring, tweaking, and repeating. And this is often the time when you're going to be employing coaches and consultants. And obviously, the longer a transformation period takes, the more expensive it gets. And often you find that your revenues will go down and the chaos goes up. And this is why so many projects fall off the rails, because change is hard. Transformation that results in a positive outcome is complex. But ultimately, what are we all here to do? Are we here because we want to be ordinary, or is it here because we want our efforts, our work, our time to have more powerful, positive impact in the world? Is there anyone in the room who doesn't want their efforts, their energies, their being there to not have more impact? Because that would be one defining factor of what differentiates a leader from a follower. A leader is going to have something that they want the change to make or an impact to make. And what's the outcome? What does that mountaintop look like when we are thriving, right? And someone said we are now in the decade of determination. I think it was Hillary Clinton who said that this is the decade of determination, and absolutely is. And it's the decade of the uncertainty. But what does someone who is leading and working in their power look like? And I just want to share a proud mum moment of my daughter. She has just started as a young doctor in at one of the Sydney major hospitals, and this has been a 12-year journey for her. And so she decided at 15 she wanted to be a doctor, and then the hurdles kept coming. She just missed out at every step of the way of getting into medicine. And finally, after doing a master's in public health and extra tutoring and all of that, she got in. She finally got in. Anyway, so here she is 4 years later, and where did they put her? They put her in the COVID ward. And I looked, the first cab off the rank straight into the COVID ward. And she said, Mum, there is nowhere else I would rather be. I am honoured that they trust me in there. And this is someone who is totally aligned in their personal power and their sense of purpose. She is respecting and recognising herself and her potential to be of value in this highly stressful environment. And she's also now, because she's respecting and recognising herself, and she has really put herself on the line, and $300,000 worth of, education later, right? This is someone who has really aligned with what is most important to her and where she wants to have that powerful impact. The fact that she's now a doctor and getting paid is really by the by. And this is also what happens, that when you are totally aligned in your purpose and power, you're working in the field that lights you up, and you are giving yourself the respect and recognition that you deserve. And that is something I find a lot of leaders gets lost by the wayside, because you're so focused on others, you're so externally focused that you get lost in the quagmire. Who relates to that, right? You're so busy taking care of everybody else. And that's not just a woman thing, right? It's often a leader thing. But this is why the alignment work and the deep identity formation work, you know, there's a young person who's totally clear about her identity and where she belongs in the world. That's where the power comes from. And this is a little bit about me. Thank you, Adrian, for that lovely introduction. But I do run marathons, and I do classify myself as an ex-corporate athlete now. But this photo, and Marianne, you'll relate to this. This was my peak performance presentation 5-6 years ago now, where I spoke on leadership and mental toughness, and I channeled Harry Potter. And everybody remembered that presentation, but I put that there because that reminds me that I'm totally qualified to speak on mental toughness and leadership because of the deep work and the passion and the the commitment I have to people performance. And this is where taking those high-tech solution sales, the what it takes, the determination, together with the human behaviour education and what makes a person successful, and how do we facilitate success in people is where my passion lies. And I am very grateful. I too am an investor today, because of some of the decisions I've made in the past. But if we look quickly at what is the business world valuing, up to 50% of the current workforce will reskill in the next 4 years. This was a World Economic Forum survey. And where are all the jobs? The jobs are all in the technical field. It's all about data. And this is music to my ears because we've been talking about better data-driven decision-making for a lifetime. And so finally, this is becoming the world. The foundation of decision-making is going to be data-driven. But where do we fit in then as knowledge workers, as leaders and managers? What strikes me is there's no category that they don't need more leaders and managers. Like in these studies, like you never see leaders and managers in terms of it being in high demand. But what stands out for me is that the focus on active learning and learning strategies and the creativity and originality, right, and initiative. So this is where I believe our role as leaders, as knowledge workers, coaches, that we must start by empowering ourselves and our people better with better active learning and learning strategies. And this is what we'll cover through the mental toughness model in the next couple of slides. So some of you may be familiar with this already. This is a very solid psychology-based model that was researched and developed by Professor Peter Clough and Doug Strukarczyk in Manchester in the UK. It has over 200 academic peer-reviewed papers of independent researchers, all testing and measuring the different aspects of this model. So the 4 C's of control, commitment, challenge, and confidence, they are the 4 psychology traits or personality characteristics that have been shown that when we have high levels of these 4 things, we tend to be able to work better under pressure. Now, and the one thing that leaders have, and indeed we all have, is that we're working under sustained pressure most of the time. And then each of these 4 categories each have 8 sub-factors, and they're the 8 factors that I will go into. And then what we'll do is we will focus on the challenge aspect and do a deep dive into there to frame out our discussion in the breakout rooms. So if 50% of our performance is due to our state of mind and we're only investing 5% of our time optimizing our mindset, you know, there's a gap. There's a gap. And that's a big gap, I find, that is people are busy, business owners are busy, leaders are busy. So, you know, to get better at delivering and embedding leadership development and training, I think there's huge opportunity for us to do that better. And these are the definitions of the 4 C's. And this was a study done by this group here. And Kostas Papageorgiou is a leading researcher psychologist who's doing some fabulous. He's also got an MBA. He's also got a molecular biology degree. So he's really integrating the research now into looking at biology and the genetics of how we perform under stress, as well as the psychology models. And we're going to come out with much more targeted interventions and ways of looking at how do we help people perform. And I guess to that end, you know, if we look at, if you're not mentally tough, if you don't have high scores in these 8 categories, because there is the MTQ plus profile assessment that I work with, and that is a good starting point for any coaching or leadership development training, because it gives us a snapshot of what are the 8 attitudes and our natural tendencies of how we think. This is not a behavioural diagnostic, it's a thinking diagnostic. And people will often ask me, where does resilience sit? Resilience sits within the mental toughness frame. It's a function of our control. So how well do we manage our emotions? How under pressure? How much agency do we believe we have in outcomes in our life, right? That's in the control category. Now, the commitment category, our goal orientation. Are you someone who loves to set goals? And are you someone who loves to achieve goals? And this is a particularly important frame when you're hiring people and looking at dynamics, but your own dynamics, right? Because not everybody is good at goal setting. Some people are much better at working towards someone else's goals. And that's often where you get the leader setting the goals, and often your sales managers, the more passionate they are about achieving those goals, the more effective they will be, because what they value is actually achieving the goal. There's plenty of people who can set goals, but they're not always necessarily driven to achieve them. But people who are goal-oriented and achievement-oriented tend to be better at coping with life's difficulties. And then we'll talk about risk orientation and learning orientation in a moment, but going over to confidence in abilities, right? Our confidence in our abilities is our sense of self-efficacy. How much do we believe that what we do matters? How much do we believe we're going to do a great job? It's the belief we have in ourselves. And this is often, you know, like, yes, we see it in the realm of Olympic athletes. We see it in the realm of like the top 1%ers, but this has got to be in the realm of each and every individual. I believe it's our human right to have belief in ourselves and our abilities, and to know that we matter. And what about our interpersonal confidence skills, how we interact with others? And definitely, you know, from my experience working with clients, particularly where you've got a really strong, mentally tough leader, and then you've got a lot of people who are mentally sensitive in the team, there are huge conflicts there, because the people who are often high in the mental toughness scores, what do you think their sensitivity might be for people who are not as tough or as able to roll with the punches as someone who is more mentally tough, right? Because the mental toughness is on a spectrum where with high scores in each of these, you are mentally tough, and the lower end, we are mentally sensitive. Now, we're not saying that we need to convert everybody who's mentally sensitive into mentally tough. No, but we need to build the capacity, the coping skills, the ability of people who are mentally sensitive. You think artists, you think the creatives, you think musicians, right? The intuitives often, because they feel everything. And so, you know, it's not that people who have higher scores don't feel things. It's just that people with the higher scores are often much more task-oriented, and they're able to handle the stresses and pressures more effectively, right? So the simple definition of mental toughness is how we react and respond to pressure, to stress. And no one's going to argue that stress is going away anytime soon. So and I haven't talked about challenge, but this is the part that I would like us to focus on, especially when we go into the breakout rooms, because the challenge component relates to our risk orientation and our learning orientation. But what is the aspect of challenge? You know, who loves, you know, who gets excited about getting to the top of the mountain? Who gets excited about winning? Obviously, some people are driven by achieving challenges, right? And they tend to be the more goal-oriented people as well, but achieving that challenge. And like George S. Patton, who was one of the great military leaders of America of the 20th century, was, you know, why do we do it? We do it because we want to feel the exhilaration of victory, right? So, and this is also the aspect of, you know, when we are under pressure, we do tend to fall back on our innate tendencies. And this is why doing assessments like this, when you're looking at succession planning, when you're looking at yourself and your own next move and where you're best working, then this is why having that awareness, the fresh awareness through a new lens, through a profile like this, will open up and show you blocks, and it will open up new pathways to explore. But so what is our risk orientation? The risk is, do you have a high or low risk tolerance? And if we look through the lens, this is Doug Stokarczyk, who's the behavioural economist, brains behind the mental toughness model, is looking specifically here at the lens of sales, right, of our risk and learning orientation through sales. So how do we see opportunities? Do we see setbacks as reasons to quit or signs to do something else, or do we see it as problems to solve and things to find solutions for? Do we see challenges as opportunities? How hungry and how effective are we in developing a pipeline, maintaining control, seizing the opportunity? So this is where, again, you're going to have some roles in your organization and some innate sense of whether you're a high risk or a much more conservative, cautious person. And your learning orientation. How well do you accept feedback? Do you look for feedback? Do you ask people for feedback? Do you ask your people for feedback? Right. So, and this is the whole world of transparency and openness. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, right? But these are all critical. Our learning orientation is also, how coachable are you? As a leader, how open are you to change? How open are you to accept that there are still things at every age that we can develop, and there are still aspects of we can't stop growing. And often I find that leaders will, they're too busy to do anything for themselves, but come in and fix my team. Well, I don't work that way. If the leader isn't prepared to do some development, I won't work with their team, because the fish rots from the head. And this is why looking at our own, being really brutally honest with what our natural tendencies are and where we can improve is so important. And as Eckhart Tolle said, that awareness is the agent of change. So often simply doing a mental toughness assessment like this is enough to, spark some initiation of change and some new catalysts to explore, to new pathways to explore within yourself. But I might just pause there. We've got another few minutes, but I'll just pause here if we go into the breakout sessions to discuss the problem. But is there any questions that anyone has at this stage?
Leah, I think just a comment from me. It's Tracy here. As we absorb this, wonderful perspective that you're sharing with us, it's also about how we can share that same learning downstream to our teams as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where, when we take it on board ourselves, we are the leader. The leader by example is so important, and this is where I may have missed a slide. Here, I missed a slide. So let's just go back to this one. And this is actually an example of what a mental toughness profile looks like. So this is, you can see their overall mental toughness is low, right? And most of their scores are on the lower side. And each of these elements can be measured and developed, right, as independently. So that's the good news, is that you can change anything. And again, with mentally sensitive people, we're helping them to develop more coping strategies and ways of working under pressure, so that they don't lose themselves and stop performing well. And the people who have higher mental toughness scores, what we're working on there is more on the emotional intelligence, more on the aspects of how they can, how they can deal with mentally sensitive people better, and also get better at being authentic themselves. Because often your people who are mentally tough can appear, to be, much more standoffish. You really don't know what's going on for them. You don't know how they're feeling. And again, how teachable are they? If that's your leadership style, how teachable are you? How coachable? But what's interesting with this report here is that if we look at their confidence abilities, the confidence is in their own abilities of what they think of themselves is low, but their interpersonal confidence is high. So they are appearing like that typical charismatic character. And yet what's really going on under the lid, there's not a lot of internal charisma really going on at all. And one of the findings that we found during COVID is that a lot of managers and leaders have really struggled with emotional control, with having to suddenly work virtually and manage their teams virtually. It's like their own role kind of came into question. It's like, because you've got all the doers doing, and they're rising to the autonomy they're experiencing. So what's the role of all these middle managers suddenly? So there's a lot of disruption going on because we've got this, the disruption of shifting to virtual. So I guess, this is also where people ask me, how do I work with people? And as I said before, I do run programs for executive teams and particularly ex-corporate women entrepreneurs who are wanting to grow their business. And because ultimately, the better we can be at performing as individuals, the more effective we're going to be at influencing and getting our point across and communicating. And often I also have developed a online course to help you develop your fresh business leader identity. And again, this then facilitates the whole change. If we want to change, there's aspects of us that need to change if we want to do something different, be something different, produce something different. But often a really good place to start is to have a psychometric assessment and debrief and development strategy, so you can get a taste of, just what's possible for you. Now, there's 3 types of people. There are people who make it happen, people who watch things happen, and people who wonder what just happened. Now, you are all here today, so you are automatically in this category. So I guess from that aspect of risk orientation and learning orientation, if you're going to put the lens on yourselves, like, where's your, what would your score be, right? If you can put that in your risk orientation, you are high or low risk taker. Put the R and then what number you are, 1 to 10, and then your learning orientation. Again, think about how you receive feedback. How do you perceive failure? Like, do you take it on board and make it all about you, or do you roll on and say, okay, what can we do differently next time? And, I would expect that most of you have a very healthy learning orientation because you're here, but it's good just to put that lens on yourselves and maybe put that in the comments as well as a bit of a self-assessment. But before we go on, the other frame I want to give you as we move on into the breakout rooms is that in any business there are 3 types of roles, right? And again, this plays into your business identity. And are you an artist? Are you the manager leader? Or are you the entrepreneur? And I'll give you these definitions. The artist then, are you someone who is the creator, the producer, the deliverer of product or service that's the heart and soul of the company, and you would never think of selling, right? So typically artists will be people who do start businesses as well, right? But they are the heart and soul and they are the business. The manager leader is someone whose natural tendency or their role tends to be more in the people and processes, and you're passionate about building systems, and you're also the go-to person in a crisis because you're the moderator, you're the one that keeps all the cogs working, that the artist is creating and going crazy, and you're kind of making the business actually happen. So often, we'll see CEOs in this manager leader category. The definition of the entrepreneur is someone who's really interested more in businesses. They're building businesses to sell. They're not interested in micromanaging. They might have an idea for a business, but they'll find the artist to make it happen, and then they'll hire the manager to manage it all. And really, that is someone who has the high risk tolerance. And really for business growth into the future, you need to have all 3 of these, right, in your business, but your natural default is, again, where we go under pressure, you're going to find yourself in one of these roles. So I want you to, put that lens on and sort of just, gut feel what role is your natural default. And maybe if you could put that in the chat, that would be a great start as well. Because what I want you to do is take that lens as we go into the breakout rooms. We've got about 20 minutes. Is take the challenge or the outcome you said you wanted and put the lens of your natural tendencies in terms of your attitude towards challenge. Do you race off? Are you the first one to say, give it to me, I'll get it done? Right, and that's that risk orientation of seeing the opportunity and you're driving that. And that you are also somebody who sees failure as feedback, and it's simply another data point that is there to be, to be dealt with, as opposed to it failed, therefore I'm a failure, or being so kind of shut off from everything that you don't think you could learn anymore, or having that kind of lens with a poor learning orientation. So, think about the risk orientation, your learning orientation, your attitude towards challenge, where you think you might, you can expand that and obviously and broaden your ability to solve problems. And then look at it in terms of, whether you are the artist, the manager leader, or the entrepreneur. How's that sounding?
Are
we all clear? Does somebody want to just summarize what I've said about how we're going to take this into the breakout rooms?